You have pockets where very wealthy Americans these write-offs. And so if you want to talk about tax reform and making things fairer, I agree with you. And therefore you have to significantly reduce the size of the tax code. But you can get rid of so many of the loopholes, the write-offs that people use to not pay taxes. And then if you do that, you can bring rates down from 35%, instead of bringing them up, bring them down to 25%. And you're going to have people actually paying 25%. I think that's what we do with tax reform. But not only that, if you're going to raise the top rates, you'll have many of our small businesses are pass-through entities, and many of our job growth comes from small businesses, small manufacturers. They are going to be paying increased taxes, and again, you're going to see these other folks who have their write-offs not actually pay, or they have the expensive accounts, the expensive attorneys. So I think we should have a comprehensive plan on how we deal with the budget. I think we should have a comprehensive plan on how we deal with taxes. But in difficult economic times, you go to Bill Clinton. Everyone uses Bill Clinton in the 1990s and how brilliant he was in tax rates. Bill Clinton says, don't raise taxes. Larry Summers, the former economic advisor, former advisor to the president, has said, don't raise taxes. Barack Obama in 2009 says you don't raise taxes in the midst of a recession. So I see this more as a political issue as opposed to a sound economic issue or a sound debt reduction issue. And I think we should come together and go, let's advocate for policies that help put people back to work. And raising the top tax rate, I don't think is going to bring in more revenue. I don't think it's going to bring in jobs. It's not going to put folks back to work. And that's why I don't think we should raise them, especially in these economic times. Well, I think to come close, so the best analysis, you look at it statically, you'll get $80 billion, right? We borrow 1.2 trillion. So you go, that's a great start. Now, that doesn't have any impact on what it was going to do to the economy, what kind of drag of job growth will there be, what kind of drag of investment and innovation will there be from increased taxes, especially in a very competitive environment. But in the end, if you care about more revenue, which means you probably care about balancing the budget, what is the plan? What is the president's plan to balance the budget? There is no one. What is the Senate's plan? They don't have one. And I think the most important point for your listeners and your readers to know is raising taxes isn't a plan to reduce debt on the side item. Raising taxes for more revenue to spend more is the plan. I think that's wrong. Listen, if you're going to truly be serious about debt reduction, great. But when you're talking about raising taxes on anybody to spend more money, I reject that. I expect nothing less wrong.
So, on the one hand, it is true that the pretty mainstream economics are effective
Yes, you agree with me.
widely. So, that we were just saying, poorly that this is just the wrong, regardless of if the economy is really growing at a rate, but this is just a bad growth. And those are two different things. So it's supposed to be like that.
So what do you mean? The two arguments are what?
So the two arguments are, on the one hand, is basically this is not the right time of and the other is raising taxes on money will not meet certain demands of raise revenue
Listen, I think the way you reduce the state we're talking about the growth argument, I think you do it by putting more people back to work. I think you see economic growth, you see more people making money, you see more people paying taxes. I think you see a positive net result, which is more revenue comes to the federal coffers. I think as Americans we have to understand that this is not 1990 anymore. It's not 1960 anymore. We compete against very aggressive global competitors. We compete against China and India and Mexico and Vietnam and Canada and Brazil. And if we're not competitive with our tax rates in America, which we have the second highest corporate tax rates, actually we're the highest corporate tax rates now. Japan just lowered theirs. We want to make sure we have investment here. We want to make sure we have innovation here. And if you have high rates, I think when all other things are equal, you see people go elsewhere with that investment. And if people invest more money elsewhere, you see less jobs for our Wisconsinites and our Americans. I have a hard time arguing for higher taxes but less job growth when I see people who can't find a job to put food on the table and a roof over their head. That concerns me.
I guess it. Everybody, tax rate is surely no lie. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I get a lot of Americans right now are saying that Congress tax rate. Again, for only the pot and fraction of point. But and Americans really
So let's go back to the original point, the term fiscal that comes from Jefferson, right? He's talking about the economic consequences of raising taxes.
he's talking about the whole thing.
But I didn't have a chance to talk about it. But part of this is raising taxes on Americans for all Americans. Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Barack Obama of '09. Everyone says, don't raise taxes. If you want to argue long term, I'll engage in that argument. But even in the short term, everyone is agreeing, even Barack Obama of '09, that you don't raise taxes in this environment. And so when we step back and go, well, why are we talking about raising taxes right now? One, why I think we're talking about it? I think it's a great divisive issue. You can try to use this as a wedge. So you don't have to talk about the economy and jobs and these other issues out there. But all economic observers would go, why are you doing this now? And I'd ask you guys, why? Why are we doing it now? I mean, some very smart people are going, bad idea. And I'm joining with them. I mean, again, the Barack Obama of 2009, I agree with. Don't raise them.
I think most Americans, like this whole like about Duffy, agree with raising taxes on property. Letting the tax rate.
Let me ask you this. Do you know how much General Electric pays in taxes? Zero. So, if you were to take the tax rate from 35% and do what the president wants and get it just up to 39%, now how much do you pay? Oh, okay. So, I mean, when you're talking, I think it's an argument of fairness. And I think if you also, I've seen polls that say, what is a fair amount that people should pay in taxes? You'll see people like say 20, 25, might get up to 30, but rarely are you seeing people saying 35 and 40% is a fair rate. So you actually talk about what the rates should be. I also think you get pushback with the American people on what is fair. I think what angers people isn't the rate so much as the write-offs. Because listen, you have lobbyists in Washington D.C. who come there for generations. I was riding my tricycle, riding my bike. I wasn't born yet when people were lobbying to carve themselves out of the code. I think that's what makes Americans mad. Not agree with them. When people don't pay their share because they've got powerful lobbyists or powerful attorneys or powerful accountants, that's wrong. And every American should be angry about that. But you don't resolve the problem when you talk about saying let's talk about an increase of 4%. That's not solving the problem. If you want to be bold, if you want to go big and say fix the problem in America, I'll engage in that plan. I'll engage in that idea. I'll engage in that conversation. We put out a budget in the House that balances. It dealt with tax reform. It dealt with entitlements. It dealt with spending. And there's some Americans who agree with it. There's some who disagree.